Tonight, Drew has more about Whitaker's past and his time as a U.S. attorney in Iowa.
When fired Attorney General Jeff Sessions walked out of the Department of Justice and shook hands with the man who would take over, at least temporarily, this Iowa State Senator was aghast.
Well, I initially thought I can't think of a more ill-qualified person to assume that role based upon my experience with him.
Matt McCoy has a history with President Trump's new acting Attorney General, Matt Whitaker, and it is not a good one. In 2007, McCoy was a young, gay, rising star in Iowa's Democratic Party. Matt Whitaker was the young, conservative, Republican U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of Iowa.
At the time you were indicted, you were openly gay, the only openly gay legislator in the state of Iowa. You were a Democrat. You were considered a rising star. Do you think that's why you were targeted?
I absolutely believe that's why I was targeted.
The federal indictment was brief. The U.S. attorney was accusing McCoy of attempted extortion by a public official. McCoy says it was a $2,000 business dispute with a private consulting client who wouldn't pay a bill. Those facts didn't matter to Whitaker, he says, who brought the full weight of the federal government against him.
I believe it was a political prosecution. There's no doubt in my mind. I'm 100% certain that it was.
Here is all you need to know about the case. The U.S. Attorney's Office, under Whitaker's direction, spent more than 2 years going after McCoy, using the FBI, a paid informant, secret recordings, a special prosecutor. And after 2 years, it took a jury mere minutes to reach its verdict. Not guilty.
That's correct. I was acquitted within really 20 minutes.
Whitaker was criticized heavily in Iowa's press. Reporters asking, why was McCoy prosecuted? Legendary Des Moines Register editor Gil Cranberg asked if the U.S. Attorney's case was misplaced zeal or partisan politicking.
This, for most U.S. attorneys' decision in court would have been embarrassing.
Yes.
Did it appear embarrassing? Did he apologize to you in any way, shape, or form?
No, he never reached out to me.
My name is Matt Whitaker. I've applied to be on the Supreme Court.
Whitaker's career sputtered after he left the U.S. Attorney's Office in 2009. He tried and failed to become an Iowa Supreme Court justice, tried and failed in a run for Senate. He seemed to have limited success in private practice. Then in 2014, using the legal system as a political weapon, he found an entirely new career. Backed by conservative Republican donors, Whitaker became director of the Foundation for Accountability and Civic Trust, FACT. The nonprofit claims it is dedicated to promoting accountability, ethics, and transparency in government by demanding the truth. Under Whitaker's leadership, critics say it became a tool to attack Democrats through the legal system. FACT went after dozens of Democrats, Democrat organizations, and especially Hillary Clinton, filing ethics complaints, Federal Election Commission complaints, anything it could do to legally hamstring Democrats.
I think when you're looking at an organization that is focused almost exclusively on investigating individuals of one party and one political persuasion, and that the head of that organization is now going to be installed as the Attorney General of the entire United States, that sets off a number of alarm bells.
Matt McCoy doesn't need an alarm bell. He is frightened by the prospect of Matt Whitaker in a position of power.
It's very frightening because I know how pliable he is.
You mean an attorney general who will do whatever the boss wants?
Absolutely, without question.
In the case of Matt McCoy, I mean, he was found not guilty, and I think you said 20 minutes. How much damage did it do to his career, and how much money he must have spent defending himself?
Yeah, financially, he said he's still suffering. He really took a beating. He is actually still paying off his legal bills, Anderson. But politically, it didn't seem to hurt him that much. He stayed in the Iowa State Senate, and just this week, with a vote where he got 80%, he was elected to the Polk County Commission.
Have you gotten any response from the Department of Justice or even Matt Whitaker?
Surprisingly, they did give us a response. I read some of that in that report, but they basically told us that it was Matt Whitaker's responsibility to pursue these allegations because they were credible allegations. And despite the fact that the jury didn't believe any of it, the Justice Department says it doesn't negate the obligation to open cases when laws may have been broken.
All right, Drew Griffin, I appreciate the reporting. Thank you. With me now is CNN legal analyst Carrie Cordero and Laura Coates. Carrie, you hear Drew's reporting. I mean, it's sort of ironic that Whitaker has cast such doubt on the validity of the Mueller probe when he himself, led what at least, Mr. McCoy believes was a politically motivated case that used a special prosecutor and the FBI, and it was a 2-year investigation.
Well, that report that was just given, it really just dovetails right into the issue as to whether Matt Whitaker, at the lead of the Justice Department, would use the department in the president's interest for political purposes. We know that over the course of the president's term, he has repeatedly expressed a desire and an interest in the Justice Department being used as an arm of political retribution. It's my view that Attorney General Sessions and Rod Rosenstein have basically been keeping the barbarians at the gate. And now with a political operative, basically somebody who has expressed a desire and an interest that the special counsel could be fired. He said that publicly. I think the president has somebody in place who potentially will use the department in a political way.
Laura Coates, Matt Whitaker had talked in the past about a biblical, I'm trying to get the right phrase, I think it was a biblical view of justice. What does that actually mean to you? What does that exactly entail?
Well, it means that he fundamentally...
Biblical view of justice was the correct term.
I mean, it means he fundamentally misconstrues and does not adhere to the First Amendment, which very clearly states that the government shall not endorse a religion in any shape or form, and that we actually do have a secular purpose for the judicial branch and other branches of government. And so for him to take that viewpoint, it actually shows that, frankly, there's no other way to describe this as being an asinine and idiotic statement to make. That, in addition to the fact that to have a biblical view also eliminates a lot of people whose religious viewpoints or the existence or absence of religious viewpoints would not be fit to serve on the bench, which is not how our society is run, not what we believed, and not the reason why we actually have a separation of church and state. So I think he's grasping for straws, and there's nothing there to support it.
Carrie, I mean, for those who forget high school civics, can you just explain what it means for the nation's top law enforcement official to disagree with Marburg versus Madison, which is actually, it's a pretty big deal?
Yeah, well, it's a constitutional, a foundational constitutional case, and so it says that the Supreme Court is the final arbiter in determining what the law is. So this is a foundational case, and all of these issues, his views on whether or not there is a biblical requirement for judges, his views on Marbury and Madison, his use of potentially, as your story reported, his office when he was the U.S. attorney in bringing a politically motivated case. All of those are the types of issues that would be explored in a confirmation hearing if he actually would have gone through a confirmation hearing for a senior position in the Justice Department. And that's why, in part, you're seeing so many lawyers across the political spectrum over the last 24 hours raise really serious concerns about the fact that he has been elevated to the position of Attorney General, having not gone through that confirmation process for service in this administration.
Laura, it's interesting to hear, you heard the president on Fox, a month or so ago, or several months ago, saying he knows Matt Whitaker and praising him. Now, today, saying he doesn't know him. Reminds me of when Carter Page was announced by the president on a conference call during the campaign as being one of his foreign policy advisors. He was praised by the president. Then later on, turns out they never actually even met. The president didn't really know anything about him. Same thing with, the president used to claim a relationship when he was a civilian with Vladimir Putin. And, turns out they never met until he had become president. So it's just odd that the president, whether, all the reporting is he had met Matt Whitaker or didn't talk to him on the phone, but either way, he's lying.
Well, convenient amnesia is the president's MO. You could have gone on to include George Papadopoulos. You could have gone on to include Michael Cohen at one point in time, who he had a feigned absence of recollection of who he was and why he was important in his life. Michael, did you say in some way? This is the president's MO of trying to establish a 10-foot pole between himself and people who are controversial. Now, the irony here is that the reason that Matthew Whitaker is now controversial is by the president's own actions. And as Carrie was alluding to, the fact that Matthew Whitaker has essentially leapfrogged, not only out of respect for people who were more senior than him, but also the rank and file and out of the chain of command and out of the line of succession is the president's own doing. And when you think about this, this would be the equivalent, Anderson, if all of a sudden the president himself were incapacitated, and instead of having the vice president take the reins to the ship, reins to the horse, he instead said, I think I'll have Stephen Miller do it. I think I'll have General Kelly be the person in charge of the country instead. There was an order of secession. He went around that, and now he is saying, well, I don't know why anyone's blaming me. I hardly know the person. That's the point. That's the argument people are making. And the people and the Senate do not know who this person is, and he shouldn't be in that role until they do.
Lord Coates, Gary Cordero, I appreciate it. Thanks.